The Scottish Highlands don't just feel old, they feel hungry. There's a specific kind of silence you find near the deep lochs at twilight. It isn't the absence of noise, it's a presence. Like the air is holding its breath, waiting for you to make a mistake. My friend Callum used to hike these trails alone. He liked the isolation, or so he told me. He said the lochs were like black obsidian, so still you could see your own reflection more clearly than in any mirror. But there's an old saying in the villages nearby, never accept a gift from the water, for the water never gives for free. I didn't think much of it when he first told me that. It sounded like typical folklore, but Callum's last journal entry was different. He wrote about a stillness that felt heavy. He described a mist that didn't just sit on the water, but seemed to crawl toward the shore with a deliberate, slow intent. There was no wind that evening. Not a single leaf moved, yet the atmosphere felt like it was pressing against his skin, cold and damp, smelling of ancient stone and the faint, sweet rot of lilies that had never seen the sun. He should have turned back then, but the Loch has a way of making you stay. It offers a silence that feels like an answer, even if you haven't asked a question. That's when he saw it. Standing in the shallows, draped in that gray highland mist, was a horse. It was a magnificent creature, a stallion of such pure, blinding white that it seemed to emit its own light against the darkening hills. Callum stopped. He was a man who understood animals, but this was different. The horse didn't blink, it just stood there, a perfect, motionless statue. He noticed the water dripping from its mane. It didn't splash. It fell in thick, rhythmic globs like honey or slow-moving oil, creating ripples that died almost instantly. The silence changed then. He called it the sonic void. He realized his own footsteps on the gravel had stopped making sound. He was walking, but the world had gone mute. He felt a magnetic pull, a soft, hypnotic tug at the base of his skull. The horse turned its head slowly. Its eye was large and dark, with a sideways, rectangular pupil that stayed fixed on him even as he moved closer. It didn't look like a horse's eye. It looked like a window into something very deep and very cold. He described a low, vibrating hum that started to resonate in his own chest. It wasn't a whinny or a breath. It was a mechanical, rhythmic thrum, like the pulse of a machine hidden beneath a layer of white velvet. As he reached the edge of the water, the details started to shift. You know that feeling when you look at an AI-generated image and everything seems fine until you look at the hands? It was like that. Up close, the horse's coat wasn't hair at all. It was a smooth, rubbery membrane. It looked like wet bone stretched over muscle. And then he saw the hooves. They were submerged in the black water, but through the clarity of the loch, he could see them perfectly. They were reversed. The points of the hooves were facing backward, aimed directly toward the dark, bottomless center of the lake. His mind told him to run. Every instinct was screaming at him that this was wrong. This was a predator wearing the shape of a prize, but his hand moved independently of his will. It was that magnetic compulsion again, the adhesive trap. He felt like he was being drawn in by a vacuum. The smell of ozone and wet hair grew overwhelming, thick enough to taste. He stood there for 3 seconds, just 3, with his fingertips hovering an inch above the creature's flank. He wrote that in those 3 seconds the world felt completely empty. No birds, no wind. Just him and the white thing that didn't breathe. He wanted to see if it was real. And that curiosity, that was the final mistake. The moment his skin touched the hide, the trap snapped shut. There was no struggle, just a sound like a heavy boot stepping into deep, wet mud. A wet, rhythmic suction. Callum tried to pull his hand back, but it wasn't just stuck, it was fused. He described the sensation of his skin and the horse's hide becoming a single, seamless organ. The bond was instantaneous and absolute. And then the horse began to walk. It moved with a terrifying mechanical power, its joints clicking with a sound like breaking wood. It didn't run. It simply walked toward the center of the loch, dragging Callum with it. He fought. He threw his entire weight backward, digging his heels into the gravel, but it was like trying to stop a freight train. As he pulled, he saw his own skin stretch. It didn't tear. It stretched like melting plastic, turning translucent, showing the white bone beneath. The horse's skin felt ice cold, yet the point of contact was burning, a searing heat that felt like it was welding his soul to the creature's spine. The water reached his knees, then his waist. The horse's head dipped beneath the surface without creating a single ripple. Callum's last thought wasn't about the pain. It was the realization that the horse wasn't a horse at all. It was just a tongue, a long, white tongue belonging to the lake itself. By the time the search party reached the loch, the water had returned to its obsidian state. There was no sign of a struggle, no flattened grass, no disturbed gravel. The loch was a perfect, unbroken mirror, reflecting the gray sky and the silent hills. They found his notebook. It was sitting on a flat stone at the water's edge, perfectly dry. It was as if someone had placed it there carefully, a small token left behind by the water. The last page ended mid-sentence. People like to think these stories are just legends. They think the Kelpie is a myth to keep children away from the waves, but if you ever find yourself in the Highlands and you see a lone horse standing by the water, don't look at its coat, don't look at its eyes, look at its feet. If the hooves point toward the water while the horse faces you, don't speak. Don't even breathe, just walk away, because once you touch the white hide, you aren't a traveler anymore. You're just the part of the lake that was missing. It only waits until it's unempty again. And the stillness is how it tastes your fear.